35 years ago, I came up here with my husband. We purchased the local water slide here. This is very well known and popular. Friedrich and Augusta were my great-grandparents. They came out separately from Prussia, and she came here at the age of 24 with 3 children. In the next 12 years, she had another 5 children, so they had a family of 8. In 1881, my great-grandparents took over the managership of the Cubs Camp Hotel, and they were there for nearly 20 years. The railway line had been built up to Gympie, so my great-grandparents decided to build a hotel beside the station. I do look on my great-grandmother as a very good businesswoman, because she was totally involved in the Cobbs Camp Hotel and the Criterion Hotel for what we might say is about 30 years.
We've got a cenotaph here, which is one of the very earliest cenotaphs that were constructed in this whole region, if not the first. And there's some fairly important people who came back from the war and were involved in that. We also have the statue of the Whaler horse, which is really unique. It's not something I've ever seen anywhere else. The Whaler horse was a breed of Australian horses that was taken to Gallipoli and into the Middle East during the war. And unfortunately, they weren't allowed to be brought back. But they were a fantastic horse. They're a big horse, huge head on them, very intelligent, could carry big loads, and were ideal for what they had to do in those areas at Bathsheba and also in Gallipoli. The people of Woombye are proud of their history. From the Cobb & Co days through to the war years, the horse was a really integral part of the Woombye thinking and the way that they lived their life.
The hall that we have down there is named after a local resident, Hugh Morehouse, who was a pineapple farmer. Hugh Morehouse was a survivor of the First World War and then was asked to raise the troop. He re-enlisted in the Second World War and was one of the garrison commanders. In the 1920s, he re-raised the light horse in this district. But there are pictures of him on his grey-mounted horse. He's an impressive-looking man. His family still live in this area. His daughter and son-in-law were members of the group. So there is a connection to the past with the people that are there now.
St Margaret's Church, and it's an Anglican church. Most of the settlers were around here in Woombye. So they decided to build it here, and it was my father and 2 uncles, Ted Ratcliffe, and that was my father, Jack Kerr and Fred Krebs. They built the church, and my mother carried the shingles. She was 15. Round the corner from the hotel, there's Bartholomew's sawmill, and they would have carried them up the hill there. And our sister, who married Jack Kerr, she was married in the church before the roof was put on, and then my mother was married there in 1900. She was the second bride in the church after it was finished. Her younger sister married Fred Krebs. Those men were all single when they built the church, but they were married sisters. We went to Sunday school there and got married there, and the ceiling over the altar was painted blue, and it had like a crescent moon and stars up on the ceiling, and when you're 3 or 4 or 5 years old and you're looking at that, it's quite something.
My connection to the school is multifaceted, can I say. Not only was I a student there from 1951 to 59, but my father, of course, was a student there. He enrolled in grade 3 in 1920 when the family moved there. And after I graduated primary school, went to Nambour High School, went to Teachers College after that, came back as a first-year teacher to Woombye Primary School. I've got an old photograph there which shows a horse paddock about where the current parents' car park is at the front of the school. And so students who rode horses to school could put their horse safely in the horse paddock. I'm assuming it could be Remembrance Day, because you can see some soldiers in uniform in the near left. There seem to be students with three-legged races also in the foreground. The thing that's jumped out at me was the fact that the cricket pitch is in exactly the same position as it is today. It hasn't moved, but just about everything else has. It says something about the Australian way of life, doesn't it?
3 ancestors of mine all came to Woombye in the early days. One of them had a sister who had come out here earlier, and they nominated the McClintocks to come out here. This particular photo has him very proudly standing outside his shop that he's built. And in this photo is his 2 sons. My grandfather left school, went to all his schooling here at Woombye, and he started working for my great-grandfather immediately he left school, as did the next son, Thomas. My grandfather in particular, we know that he went down to the Hamiltons and learnt the trade of wheelwright for this business. They started coach building, and Uncle Tom was the painter for the coach building. So both sons were involved in the business once it came to Blackall Street from the very beginning.
My family moved to Woombye back in the 1960s. Family were involved in the bakery business. My father was started in Sandgate with his father, and they just wanted to spread his wings. So did the drive with the family from Brisbane through to Cairns, and on the way stopped in at Woombye and loved the place. And on the way back, we stopped here, and I think McLean's owned the bakery at the time. And Mum and Dad and we were invited to stay, and the decision was made then to buy the bakery. Alex, I think his name was retiring. It was a very young, very great community, and I think that's what Dad and Mum were looking for. One of the big advantages of being the bakers in town, like the butchers in town, or you got to know everyone very, very quickly, because they'd come in and want their bread, and Dad was a great baker. My dad used to work incredibly hard, long hours, and particularly Easter time, he just worked straight for, sometimes 24, 48 hours. Many's the time I can remember coming out and Mum would say, where's your father? And I said, I bet he's gone to sleep over the front gate. So he'd go out to pick up the paper, and someone would talk to him, and he'd be leaning on the gate, and he'd actually fall asleep leaning over the front gate.
It was late 1890s that it was built, and it's been going since then. It's just amazing that there was a big of a hiatus around about the wartime when it fell into great disrepair, and I think it's at its peak now. It's so well run now. We hire the hall out for dancers, dancing classes, Tai Chi. There's even a KB club that meets there every month, and all sorts of weddings and wakes and in between. The hall money generated from the hiring is enough to maintain it, along with some grants for the really big things. In the last 7 years since I've been involved, we've installed air conditioning in both halls, solar panels. We've had the interior of the halls painted, and we've got a good, robust committee of 13 members. And we've also got a web page and an email address, and we've brought the hall kicking and screaming into the modern day.
The history goes back to 1922 when my grandfather arrived in town. He came from out west. He was out at Yulbar, where he was the branch manager for Cobb & Co. at Yulbar. Decided he'd take a change and came here, which was the Cobb & Co. was the halfway station at one stage. So he had this bit of a loose connection. So he decided to come here and set up shop. Purchased the shop from, I think it was Buckley's in 1922. We had it in our family right through till 1978, so over 50 odd years. McLaughlin and Company. Working in the shop, it was really a family business. The shop was a general store, it was classed. And in the general store, it was groceries, there was produce, 2 petrol bowsers out the front, Down the back there was the oil shed, the petrol shed and the grain shed. And the very bottom shed was the explosives shed. We'd sell gelignite, detonators. You know, as we got a little bit older, we all had to start driving, and we all had our practice driving down the back of the shop, around and round the gelignite shed, but none of us ever hit the gelignite shed, so that was good. Sometimes the economy wasn't doing too well, particularly around the late 60s was when it was really tough for the local pineapple farmers then. But the community was extremely good when Dad died, and the shop was it was our lifeblood for quite a long time.
I'm part of the Townsend family farming organisation that grew pineapples in this Woombye area. From my father came here in 1949 and we finished farming in 2005. We didn't know they'd actually taken that photo. It wasn't until they actually gave it to us that we knew it had been taken. That is the family farm where my mum and dad lived. All the family was quite proud of what we achieved over the years, because we could see that growers in other areas on flat country were doing it a lot easier than we were. It was hard physical work. You know, like all our planting was done by hand with either a hoe or a trowel. You know, and we were planting up to 480,000 a year. If we'd wanted to farm probably better and bigger, we should have gone to flat country, moved down to Biwa, Glasshouse, somewhere like that. But we didn't want to leave the Woombye area. There was such a draw to live in Woombye, being such a nice area to live in. That's what kept us here, and we stayed farming here.
I was born in the South Burnett at a place called Woombye. I went out to work when I was 12-year-old on a dairy farm. I worked there for 4 years, and then the fellow that I was working for, he swapped his dairy farm, which was 640 acres, for a pineapple farm, which was 17 acres on Atkinson Road at Woombye. And he asked me whether I'd like to come with him. And I said, yeah. I said, 17 acres, we'll only have a couple of days' work and we'll be finished. But I was in for a shock. I took that photo, would have been about 1960, and I took it down across where I first worked on when I came there, so that I had a sort of a record of where I first came to, you know. There was about 200 growers around Woombye at that time. So there's all pineapples there in that photo. I used to plant 100,000 plants a year with a little hoe. Even with cyclones are on, if the pines were ready to pick, you had to go and pick them. So you got out there and picked in the rain. Well, I was only young, so I handled it quite well. Actually, I used to play a lot of sport, and I was a bowler in cricket, so I didn't have to train for that because I was walking around the hills all the time.
I came here in 1957 as a child, and when I completed my school years, I became a pineapple farmer, and followed pineapples from that time, from about 16 to now, and only retired from growing pineapples last year. The co-op had an overriding control of the bin pool. The cannery used to take out a fee for the administration, and that money was paid to the fruit growers, and they administered and did all the bookwork for the bin pool. We were loading down at the station as the bin pool, and we had our bins all stored down there. We'd either store them at your farm or you had them down on the railway yard. They'd hold about 800 kilos of pineapples. They had a number on them, and Woombye bin pool, and when you wrote your docket out, you'd write that number. For tracing, we had to write what block we got it off on the farm. And we had 750 bins in the system. You send them down and then you've got to wait till they're empty before you can get them back. The shunter used to come back at about 11 o'clock at night. And so if we were short, we'd be up there at 11 o'clock at night getting our bins so that we had something for the next day. So one year we really ran into trouble. We had a lot of rain and then we had heat. And all the fruit ripened in one hit. And at one stage we had 600 bins on the ground in the yard. We still had to pick more. Cannery used to be able to do about 1,000 tonne a shift. If it wasn't for the fruit growers getting that message through quickly, we wouldn't have been able to clear, because we had to empty the bins before we could then get them back to the farmers to fill again.
I've done a few things in my life. Yeah. When I started to go out of pineapples, I started to plant avocado seed through the pineapples. I finished up with 180 trees of avocados. Graham, he had a tree over there and it was a Charwell. It was absolutely loaded, but the DPI, they said, no, they won't do any good here. They're no good. And when I seen that tree, I had other opinions. Anyway, after I planted them, they got away real well. Graham got a couple of big avocados over there, so I decided to pinch a few grafts off him and I got one. That's when I got the biggest in the world avocado, 1.8 kilos. It takes 2 of us a week to eat it. It's absolutely beautiful. We don't have bread and avocado. We have avocado and bread. It's extra good, believe me.
I'm a local farmer's son, and I arrived here when I was 4 years of age. And my family have been heavily involved in the community activities over the last 50 or 60 or 70 years, yes. In 1968, Mrs. Bonney asked me if I would partner the current Miss Queensland for a ball in Nambour. And I said to her, I would love to do that, but I think one of the entrants would like me to partner her. And then I partnered the entrant in that ball, and then I partnered Helen in the regional judging of the Miss Australia appeal. Her name is Helen Newton. I was going to say I might have been chosen because I was the only 20-year-old boy who had a dinner set in town, but that's probably not true either, but I tell the story whether it's true or not. And then she went on to become Miss Australia. Then Woombye did get a lot of great publicity, little farming town, beautiful girl, wins Miss Australia, and we were so proud of her, and she was so humble and beautiful, and so it's just a nice story to be able to tell about our town.
We call our children the Woombye Explorers, and as they walk Woombye, they're looking and listening, and they're learning about the culture, the heritage, the history and community. We sort of look at it that it really does take a village to raise children, and we have our Woombye ELC community of families and then this wider Woombye community. Jen has been working with the Woombye Explorers, doing a lot of mapping. You did that last year.
Mm-hmm. They know the bakery across the road and they can share stories with that, and sometimes we can even smell the bakery when we're in the yard. So there's that just shared commonality that we can bring into the centre, then also go out and extend upon. We love the trees, the big poinsettias in the main street. It becomes part of our visual art, and just we enjoy the greenery, the shade, finding a place to sit and just watch Woombye. And yes, using that to draw their maps. And as those skills developed their spatial awareness, we started to draw more in-depth pictures of the building. So there's always a new adventure every time we leave the gate. So it's exciting, and they love being part of this community.
My husband and I bought the butcher shop 7 years ago in August it'll be. Lived here for about 17 years, I think. We built a house, so yeah, got 2 young boys who go to school locally. My husband worked in the shop before we bought it, and we looked at quite a few shops before we bought Woombye, and he always said that the nicest customers were in Woombye. He said you didn't have upset customers, they were just all friendly, and he said if he ever had the opportunity to get that shop, it was the one he wanted, and so we're lucky to be able to do that. The tree out the front just has this beautiful orange around Christmas. My cousin actually designed the logo, and my husband James always said he wanted the orange of the flower, and it goes great in the summer months. The tree blossoms and the orange against our grey and orange logo, it just ties it in and makes for a really nice photo and outlook.
I've recently entered the town. I've started a new business here, a podiatry business. When I was looking for the potential space for the new practice, I just got that feeling instantly. Whether you walk up the street and have a chat to whoever it may be, you just get that sense of community. We've really tried to keep the heritage of the building. Some really nice wooden doors and windows, sash windows. So these kind of elements have just added and enhanced the building, but keeping it modern, but still just keeping that kind of country feel with the polished floorboards and the wooden shelving. And we restored a beautiful old wooden desk. As a younger person coming into a town that has a lot of history, it's refreshing to see that that community spirit still exists. It's good to be a part of, bringing our own story in and introducing ourselves, and later on being able to tell those stories. Hopefully we're here for a long time to be able to do that.
There's no point in me having these stories unless I've got someone that's keen to hear them. This is what people want to know. They want to know what the forebears did before them. And they want to know now, but they want to know and discuss it with their kids in 20 years' time. Go somewhere where they can listen to what the citizens of Woombye did in the early 1900s through to the 2000s and beyond in generations to come.